Hey guys, John the Quant here. This is part 2 of automated reporting using Python and Microsoft Excel. Hopefully you came straight over from part 1, and if you haven't seen part 1 yet, I'm going to put a link in the description. Part 1 is going to talk about what really prompted this and kind of show you what we're doing. But in this video, we've taken that code from part 1 and turned it into functions, Python functions, so a person doesn't have to run an entire notebook for each report. They just need to fill in the input variables for these functions, and then they can run the functions, and it will create a completely new, formatted, and gorgeous Excel report. And it works fast, it looks great, and it's fairly flexible. So let's go over to the computer and take a look. Okay, we're over on the computer looking at Colab. I've already run this notebook to make the functions, but I thought what we would do first is just run this part where it says put it all together. So let's go over to the folder in my Google Drive. This is where our new Excel report is going to be generated. You can see it's not in here yet, but I've got the data. The data is right here and it's important. And this is the notebook that I'm using. This is a picture of my dog. We'll need that later. All right, so at the end here, you can see we use a dictionary to use for the pivot table values, index columns, ag function, fill value, CSV path, which leads it to this test data. I'm using a row total, not a column total. We'll really go over what most of these things mean. This one is telling it which picture to use as the logo. I'm using my LinkedIn photo right here. And up here, workbook location, that tells it what to name the final notebook. So this one's going to be called automated_workbook.xlsx. You can see it does not exist yet. So let's run this one. Then here, this report dictionary, this is a class that I created that we can put all of the information that gets plugged into the report into it, all the string information. And this is information that the chart will need. Okay, chart title, type, where to put the anchor, etc. Now, these are the actual functions. So the first one, create pivot table, creates the pivot table and puts it into a, actually it just saves it, I think. I don't remember. We'll look it up in a minute. But then the next one, create report workbook, puts that table into an Excel workbook. Next, format pivot table just kind of makes that table look pretty. Then we have one that inputs the header and one that makes the chart and puts it in. So let's just run this. Give that a second. All right, let's go back to the Google Drive. We'll need to refresh it. I refreshed it too fast. One more time. There it goes. Took it a second, but it popped up. Let's have a look at what that looks like. This is the final output from what we just ran. It takes it a second to load as well. But look, there it is. This looks just like the one from before. So if you wanted to make it look nice as a PDF, you'd hit print, portrait, fit to page. Then if you can see on the print preview, this is what the final report would look like. It's got the title, date, logo over here, information for audience contact, then title, page, everything just as it was in the last video. So now let's go through and let's talk about these functions that I wrote that make that report. So we'll scroll back up to the top. First, all you need is openpyxl, pandas, and string, but you do need the most recent version of openpyxl. That's 3.0.7 right there. If you use a version before 3, then there are a couple of methods that are used in the functions below that don't work. So it's got to be openpyxl. It's got to be most recent version. And here we have create pivot table. It takes in a CSV file, pivot table inputs, total row, which is binary, Boolean actually, and total column, which is also Boolean. So the way this works is it uses pandas to read in the CSV, and then it just takes that data. Okay, so the data's already got to be clean before you can do this. And it creates a pivot table. It uses this pivot table inputs ought to be a dictionary. That's what we saw down here. This one. That needs to have values, index, columns, ag function, or aggregate function, and fill value. But then up here, it takes those, just sorts it, puts it into this pivot table function. Very simple. If the total row is true, which it is by default false, then it adds a row on the bottom that is the sum of everything on the bottom, of everything, of all the, rows above it. There we go. And if total column is true, then it puts a column on the end that is the sum of all of the previous columns. And then it just returns the output table. Here, right here, this is where I tested it. This is what the table came out looking like. The next function, create report workbook, it takes in the pivot table. It takes in a workbook name. I guess table could just be any sort of data frame, but I've been using pivot tables, so I call it table. You've got to give it a workbook name. That's the name that it's going to give the workbook at the end. You've got to tell it what worksheet of the workbook you want to put it on. Default is report, no problem. I've got start row equal 23. Let's go back to this and look at this here. You can see here the table was input starting on this row, which ended up being 24. But that's what start row means, is where do you want the first row of the table to be inserted into your Excel spreadsheet. And then start column, I have it equal none here, but we work with that later. So if table shape, if there are more than 13 columns, then it doesn't work. And that's because I only want to go from A through M here. Okay, that's 13 columns. And the reason for that is just because it looks nice in the print preview. Everything looks like it's a good shape and size, whereas if you went farther or shorter, then it would look kind of messed up. So table can't have more than 13 columns, and that just ends the function if you try. But if start column equals none, then, so you can tell it what first column you want it to be in. But if you don't, then this right here actually tells it to put the last column in column M. All right, so it calculates where does the first column need to go for the last column to go in M, which again makes it look good in the print when you actually print it. And so that's all this function really does, is it finds out where to put stuff, and then it just writes it to it, uses the pandas data frame method to Excel to put that into an Excel spreadsheet. And then I had it print workbook created and then tell you the workbook name and the sheet name, which you can see down here. Workbook created tells you the workbook name, where it is, and the sheet is report. Then, now that the table is in a workbook, we're going to format it. And I kept, whenever I was making these and trying to make them more flexible, I added inputs and took away inputs. So this documentation is not entirely up to date, but we've got here format pivot table. It takes in the workbook. All right, this needs to be the one that you just created. And the worksheet, it's got to be the same worksheet also. That's why it's set automatically to report. Striped equals true tells you whether or not you want these colorful stripes. Color tells you what color should these stripes be. Decimals is for rounding. If this, we actually had integer values, so the rounding didn't matter. But if you don't have integer values, it'll round your numbers to 2 decimal places or 1 decimal place or whatever you want. Then this is if you want to output the table location, which you need to do to go to the next, to go use the next function. So this is set automatically to true. If you were just using this to format a table but not automate a complete report, you could set this to false. It wouldn't matter really. And then row total. This needs to be the same values as before up here. Okay, row total or total row. So it just tells us, is there a row total or is there a column total? And that's just going to decide whether or not we put this line. Say right here it's true, so we have this line above the total row right there. And if we had a total column, it would put a bold line, a bold border between that. So first we need to load the workbook, get the worksheet out of it, and then we're making a list of all of the letters of the alphabet in uppercase so that we can loop through columns A, B, C, and so on. Now we need to get where the table starts and where it ends, both in columns and rows. All right, again, so we can loop through things. Then we've got a loop here that goes through each column and then through each row. So it's going to go through every individual cell in this table, every individual cell. And when it gets to that cell, first it is going to change the font to be Calibri and size 12 and not bold. Then it's going to remove the borders. Because this is empty, it just sets all the borders to none. And then right here, it's changing the alignment to make everything right aligned and bottom aligned. If you don't do that, then sometimes you get things left aligned, sometimes things are centered. It just looks better if you right align everything. And then if the type, okay, so if it's a float value in that cell, then it rounds it. So it doesn't do anything if, say, like here, we have these integers, those don't get rounded. If you had strings, it wouldn't do anything either. It's got to be a float value. Then it rounds it to the certain number of decimals, which you set up here. Default is 2. Further down, we're looping through all of the columns, and we're setting, well, actually this, we're looping through all of the columns, but only in the start row. So it's going through this column, 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 and it's setting the border on the bottom. Next, if the row total is true, then we want to loop through all of the columns, but on the bottom row to make that line right above the total row. Then further down, if the column total is true, we would have made it on the left here. And then we're making the stripes. So if striped is true, make the stripes, tell them what color to be. Then, so when it actually puts in the table, this first column was in column G right here. So then after it's formatted everything, what it's doing is it's taking everything in column G, which is this information, moving it to column A, and then merging everything back to make it look the way it looks right now. And then we have to save it. Then if you tell it to keep the table location, then it returns this tuple with table start column, table end column. And you do need these for the next function that you would run in order to automatically generate the full report. Now here, we need a lot of information to plug in. This title, we need this and that one. I think I told it what, yeah, so all of this text information here. This title, the highlights, the text paragraph, we need all of that to be able to put it in. So what I did was I just created an object. I created a custom class that just, you put in the soup title, which is this big one, and the date, and then it just creates this object, right, that has all of that can hold all of the information in it. So it's got the soup title, the date, and then it creates an empty dictionary to save the contact information, because the contact information, I'll show you down here. Let's run this. Comes out looking like this. You've got, it's nested, right? So over here we've got media and investors analysts. So first it's got this media one, and then media contains a dictionary with all the information that goes in there, the person's name, their phone number, and their email. So media in this dictionary contains these three things in a separate dictionary. And then investors in the contact dictionary contains those three things in its own separate dictionary, which you can see right there. And it's got the subtitle, which is this one. It's got two highlights, which are also kept in a dictionary. Let's put that down here. You can see highlight 1 has the string that goes in the first box. Highlight 2 has the string that goes in the second box. And then it's got a text paragraph where it just saves the whole text thing. Right now we're still just typing this into Python, but the goal is to create a user interface that is very easy, very intuitive for people to use, so that they can then run these and automatically generate reports completely on their own. So that object, the report information dictionary, report info dictionary object, holds all of the strings that go in here. Next function, input report header. It takes in the workbook, needs to know the worksheet. You've got to import an object of this class. You've got to put that in. Report info dictionary has to go in here, all right? And it needs also a logo file. And then logo dims tells it how big you want the logo file to be. 200 and 170 looks nice. This is the shape that you get. It looks good. It's a good size for that place as well. So again, after loading it, then we're just inserting things, inserting information from the report dictionary that holds all of this text information. And then we're setting the fonts to things that look nice. You can't really change the fonts and stuff because that's just too much customization. I don't think people could generally handle it, I guess. And I don't know why you would change it, so I don't think there's a good point in making it happen. Now in here, whenever we're inputting the contact information, this is where we're using contact keys, which is a list form of the, so the report dict has that contact dictionary, that nested contact dictionary. And we're taking the keys out of it, which in our example were investors/analysts or media, and we're just getting those keys into a list so that we can cycle through it and we can input the word media in all uppercase right here, bold it and everything, and then we can go into the report dictionary's contact dictionary and pull out the name that goes with media, the phone number that goes with media, the email address that goes with media, and input that stuff right here. Then we did the same thing with the other one. You can see this one, second contact, does exactly the same thing. Then the subtitle and the highlights gets the information from the dictionary, sets it all up, and then merges the columns straight across and centers it to make it look like this. Centered all the way across. Next, we just need to input the text paragraph, this right here. So it gets the text paragraph that you put in the report dict object, and it just places it in and then merges all the cells. So it places it into A14, then merges all of these cells, tells it to wrap text and stuff like that to make it look all nice. And then it also adds the logo. Your logo file, I guess it doesn't have to be. You have to put the name of the logo file into this function so that it can load this up, set the dimensions, and then just place it here in J1, and then it saves after. So at this point, we've got everything but the chart. So all of this stuff, except for the chart, has already been put in by the functions that we've written. So the last function is the one that makes the chart. And it takes in the workbook and the worksheet. It takes in a chart title, defaults to none. Chart type, it only works for bar and line charts right now because I just haven't looked that deeply into what kinds of charts are available in Excel and how we could use them. So that's something that if you needed more than bar and line charts, I don't think would be very difficult to write in. I just haven't done it. It tells you the chart loc column, which is what column does the left side of the chart go in. So with B, it puts it right here, which I think looks good. Looks pretty centered and nice. Chart width, again, 17. So if you anchor it in B and give it a length or a width of 17, then it ends up being this size, which looks pretty good in the print preview. Table location, that is the 4-part Where did it go? The 4-part tuple from before. This one. And it's just used to tell us where should the chart go. Okay, and then where does the chart go? And it helps us get the data from the chart as well. Okay, so it tells us where to put the chart in relation to the table, and also where can we get the data for the chart out of the table. So it's very important. And then, is there a row total? Is there a column total? I should probably set all of these to be the same defaults. One of these has row total equal false. Also, yeah, I should change that. I'll go ahead and change it. You can watch me, right? Like this. So now by default, all of them have a row total, but none of them have a column total. And all of the wording is the same. Okay, it looks like this rather than the other way, and that just helps people understand how the functions work together, people that are reading it. All right, let's get into this, make report chart. So we've got to load the workbook, we've got to get the worksheet. And every single one of these, after it's created, we've got to pull it out so that we can work with it. First, we're going to check and see if the table loc is a tuple. So it has to be a tuple of length 4. All right, and it's got to go start column, start row, end row. That's how this works. If it's not in that order, you're going to get all kinds of crazy stuff. So if it's not a tuple, or if it's not length 4, then it's going to print out this error and it's going to stop. Okay, it's going to say you've got to put it in, and it's got to be of length 4, and it's got to go start column, start row, end row. Now, if the chart type is bar, we're making a bar chart. If chart type is line, we're making a line chart. And if it's not one of those two, then we're only making bar charts and line charts right now. So if row total is true, then the final row will be the final row. Okay, table loc 3 is end row, and then -1 because we have because the total row would be 35, but we don't want to include this in the chart, so it ends here at 34, -1. And if it's not, then if we didn't have this total row here, then we wouldn't care, and we'd go all the way to the end of the chart. Same thing for the column total. If we had a column total, then we would go to the end column and go back 1. So if this was a total column, we wouldn't want to include this in the chart, so we would end our chart data here. But since it's not, we go straight to the end of the column. And then we get our chart data, which is an openpyxl.chart.reference object, and you tell it what worksheet you're using, which column to start with. All right, and this one here we said table loc 0, which is the start column, +1, tells it to start here in this column. Rather than the first column that has information in it, we're starting here at this column. And we're going all the way through. So this part right here tells it that the data for the chart is in this square. And then the next one with the categories, all right, it's just the first column, and you're only getting these things. So it tells it that the name for the chart, the categories for the chart, are in this square right here. And then you add the data, you add the categories, you set the width to, well, I actually forgot. I made this up here, let's change that. There you go. Forgot this too. I made it chart, what is that? Chart underscore location column, column, there you go. All right, and give it a title, style 5. There are different styles that go by number in Excel. 5 looks good. I just leave it at 5. And then report workbook, and you save it. And then put it all together. This is where we started. This information is stuff that you need to create and format the table, and also to create the chart, create the workbook. Sheesh, there we go. To create the workbook and input the table, you need stuff in this cell. Then we created the report info dictionary object, all right, which is called report dict, that holds all of the strings that get placed in all this stuff, and then the information for the chart, and then just run it in this order, and it all works out. So it looks great right here, but it's not worth much if that is the only thing you can make. If that's the only report you can make, then these are worthless. So I thought we'd go through it real quick together and make a brand new report. So let's go in here. Well, actually, let's look at what the data looks like. What did I call it again? It is automation underscore test data. Great. I think I had it saved. CSV location, maybe. What did I call it? CSV path. There it is. CSV path. And let's look at what's in there. Let's try to make it pretty different from what we have before. How about this? We'll use time till sent. Let's have a look at that. Okay, that looks good. But, I've got an idea. This is supposed to be a time delta object, but as you can see, it's just an object. It's supposed to be a time delta data type. So I think we need to do this, apply a lambda function x, and pd.toTime delta x. Let's see what that looks like. See what that gives us. All right, it makes it a time delta. So let's save that here. And we don't want it to say days. We just want 0, 4, whatever. Ugh, why am I having such a hard time with that? See if this works. Syntax could be off. Let's save that as time integer here, all right? And then let's save it. Let's see, it goes to the drive, my drive, Colab notebooks, automation. Then let's call it automation data 2.csv. Let's do that. Make sure that pops up here. So what we've done is we have taken the data that we had. We've taken this time till sent, which measures the difference between the time that the complaint was received and the time that it was sent, and we've changed it into an integer rather than an object. Okay, so we changed it to a time delta and then got the integer number of days out of it. And the reason for that is that a pivot table has to have numeric values to aggregate here. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a new report, and instead of having, where is it, this one, instead of having the number of complaints in these columns, it's going to have the average time it took them to handle the complaint in that average, in these columns. All right, so it's going to be the average amount of time that it took them to handle these complaints in each year for each of these companies. So now that we've got the data made, we really should only need the put it all together cells. So in this one, let's change it. This is our, instead of product, counting the products, now we're using time integer, okay? Let's switch these. Let's use the received year as the index. And let's use the company as columns, why not? And instead of counting them, we want to use the mean. And instead of fill value, instead of 0, all right, because 0 would be meaningful in this, we're going to use the string n/a. Now, what did we name our data? Again, we named it Automation Data 2. Automation Data 2. I don't want a row total because the total for the means wouldn't make any sense, and I don't want a column total for the same reason. Let's change this, put an _2 on the end there. Okay, this is the workbook that it's going to make is going to be named this. And then the image to use for the logo, I thought it might be fun. I've got this picture of my dog here. Look at him. So we're going to use his picture as the logo. And it's in the same folder here, but it is called Bino, that's his name, .jpg right there. Yes, okay. Then for the next batch of things we need, it's going to be all the info to put in the report. Let's see, what should we call this? How about Cfpb complaint time report? What's today's date? It is the 30th. I don't think I need to change this stuff. This is all fine, right? Then let's give it a new name. Let's call it Consumer Complaint Response Time Report, 2011 to 2016. I didn't get any info for this. Let's see. Let's see if we group it by year. I'm about to mess this up. Group it by year, and then have a look at the mean. Fine. This should be received year. That's what's up. There we go. All right, so we've got these two are meaningless. But this one tells us what's going on. Let's see. All right. Throughout the 5 years, the 5-year period, the average response time, the average complaint response time was 4.6 days. All right, what else have we got? What else can we say here? Let's see. The average response time grew from 2011 through 2013, then plummeted by 2016. No, let's change that. Then fell from 2014 through 2016. That's fine. And let's see, it is now the 30th. And let's just put some words in here. What should we say? The average response time for Cfpb reports, let's spell it out, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. How about for consumer complaints to the filed to the, haha. I'm just trying to fill in more words. The average response time was 4.6 days, but varied widely through the 5-year period. In 2011, when the Cfpb began, its mission, the average time was 4.6 days. This grew to 5.5 days in 2012, then to 8.5 days, 2013, before falling to 4.5 days, 2014, then 3.1 days. And finally, 1.5 days, 2016. It is not clear if the quicker response times led to greater or lesser consumer satisfaction with the Bureau. And then a couple of blank spaces, see report and chart below for details. That's all good. Let's run that. Not a whole lot of words, but it's okay. Next, we need to make a chart. Let's see. Wrong spot. How about average response time by company and year? Let's make it a line chart. We'll still put it in B and have it be 17 though. Now it's time to put it all together. Now the reason that I have these cells, okay, these ones here, let's get rid of this. This cell and this cell and this cell is so that I can set all of the input variables for the function, so I don't actually need to change anything here. And then I just push play, and it makes it. Workbook created, automated workbook 2, and sheet equals report. So let's go check that out. And let's see what it looks like. There we go. You can see the line chart wasn't really a great idea. Actually, you can kind of see that starting at the beginning, Nation Star Mortgage had a super high average response time. What is this? It's got to be like 90 days or something. Where is that? What was it called again? Nation Star Mortgage. 91 days. Now, obviously, if we were actually making this report, we would want to switch the rows and columns here. But I just thought we'd end up looking way too similar to this. We also didn't change the color, but you can see there's a picture of Beano. I have a typo right here in the capital E. And it input everything differently. It made a different kind of chart. But all in all, it looks nice. And if I were to print it, portrait style and fit to page, then it would pop up and it would look like this. And it looks great and it works. And you can see that the functions we made are fairly flexible. They just can't overpower, human decision making. So let's go over back to face-to-face and we'll talk about what we're going to do next. And that was it, guys. Hopefully you can see how quick and easy somebody could throw together a report using the functions that we've written. Now, like I said during the video, the next step, what we're going to do is we want to take those functions, connect them to a graphical user interface, okay? So that anybody who doesn't know how to use Python at all wouldn't have to program anything. They could just run the program. It would pop up. You can input all the string information that you want, tell it what kind of table what kind of table you like for the pivot table, what kind of chart and everything, and it just generates it automatically. And so that's what we're going to do. It might take a week or two for me to put that together. I've never dealt really with any of this stuff before. it was the 26th was the first day when I actually started working on this automation. I'd never automated anything. I'd never worked with Excel and Python together before, but hopefully that lets you guys know how possible it is to just build this stuff up very quickly and save yourself a lot of time for a small time investment up front. Well, I'll stop talking now. All right. So if you guys enjoyed that, let me know in the comments. If you want to see something different, let me know in the comments. If you learned something, I want you to like the video. And if you want to keep learning with me, then I'd like it if you subscribed. All right? Have a good day.